Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of This Week in Hollywood. I am, of course, your host, Adam Robson, joined by my gracious and awesome co-host, Reese Wiegman.
How are we doing, everybody? Good to be here. 8 episodes. I mean, we're getting up there already.
We are getting up there, and I'm going to be honest, we have some less, probably not as much to talk to about as we have in earlier episodes, but I think today's going to be a very good episode. Definitely a decent stuff to talk to. Excited to get into it. Of course, starting off with the current movies we've seen or plan on seeing. The Flash is now in my bank. I've seen it. The review is up on my
It's up.
YouTube channel. And I want to know if Reese, if you've seen this yet or if you plan on seeing it.
I have seen The Flash. I went and saw it Thursday afternoon, like a 3 p.m. showing, sold out, IMAX screening.
Yes.
So yeah,
exactly what I saw. So let's get into it a little bit. Obviously, my review is up, so you'll know my general thoughts on that. But Reese, go ahead and let's hear what you thought about that, and I'll chime in.
I was pleasantly surprised by The Flash, I think.
Yes.
I kind of had no expectations, just went in. What worked for me was it felt like it didn't take itself as seriously as the superhero movies that we're used to seeing as of late.
Yes.
Where you're seeing all this goofy shit and it's like portrayed like it's the biggest cinematic event of all time. Like it's just like, here's a superhero movie. To me, it read very much like a comic book would read, where there's some like whack shit going on, but you're like, it's a comic book movie. Like it's fine. It seemed like pretty lighthearted. You know, I think with the controversy around Ezra Miller, like they probably gave away a lot of the surprises they're hoping to hold back. They didn't want to use him as advertising as much. That's why you knew a lot of the big twists that we're gonna have. And there's still plenty of twists along the way. I had a good time at the movies, and sometimes that's all you need with these things. It's 2 hours of a good time at the movies. Get a bucket of popcorn, you'll have a good time.
Yeah, I would agree. I want to say, and I want to know what you thought about this, but definitely on my part, I would argue that I kind of loved the third act. I think the third act really shined in this movie. It's the first two acts that are kind of drudgery to sit through, get to that third act. But then once you get there, it's a lot of fun. And I don't want to repeat everything I said in my review. Obviously, if you guys want to hear that, you can go watch it. But, you know, I had some problems in the earlier stuff. But my biggest problem, and I want to know what you thought about this, is the CGI. I felt like it took me completely out of the movie, that a lot of this is like CGI faces, CGI actors, everything, especially when they're doing the reverse time kind of thing and even using scenes from the movie, but still just making the entire like visuals of that a bad CGI.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I do agree with that. It's like what you were saying. That had a crazy look to it. And I saw somewhere where Andy Muschietti, the director, came out and said that they did that on purpose, which I don't know if he's telling the truth or not. It's like it's a pretty easy like whenever you see all this backlash, he's like, no, we did it on purpose. But which I mean, hey, props to him either way. If they did it on purpose, like awesome for him to have the gall to do that. And then if they didn't do it on purpose, like, hey, props to him for just like saying a no you comeback. But yeah, I agree. There's some stuff that looked weird, but it's like, I don't know. Like if you're not doing it practical, like the CGI, like it's gonna look wacky no matter what. I think, especially when they're doing that like Speed Force stuff, it looked crazy. I don't know. Like, did it take me out of it any more than it would have normally? I don't know. So I wouldn't say that was a big impact for me necessarily.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm kind of different. I think the CGI took me out a lot more just because there's so much on it. I felt like a big reliance on it, especially in scenes that it didn't feel like it needed. Obviously, this is a superhero movie. You're going to get a lot of CGI as is. But I think just a little too much for me. Obviously, I rated it a 6.5 out of 10 on my review on the channel. I want to know what you thought of it out of 10, Reese.
That's tough. I don't know. 5, 6, somewhere in there.
I would agree with that. Now, I want to know for sure, obviously, a little bit of spoilers. I would skip ahead about a minute or two here, but the reveal of George Clooney's Batman at the end, what did you think of that?
I wasn't expecting that until whenever he came back, and then he called Bruce. I was like, oh, that's going to be a different Bruce Wayne for sure. Yeah. I just didn't know which one it was going to be. again, like I'm fine with it. Sure, like it seemed like the most obvious twist that could happen. The other note I have about this movie is it not still insane that the concept of the multiverse is like the most popular concept in pop culture right now? Like that's just like some
Yes.
uber nerd shit, which is like it's
Yes.
cool, but it's crazy that that's like the thing right now is like the multiverse is the thing to be doing
Yeah.
across all IP.
100%. And I even pointed this out in my review. It really, and I'm not knocking the movie for this. Obviously, it did much better than I thought. I thought this was going to be an absolute train wreck. We've talked about this in previous episodes where they said that this movie is so good they have to release it. And I was like, is it that good, or is it just it costs so much you have to try and get some return? This is a decent movie. I would say it's all right, but it's clearly influenced by the effect that No Way Home had. You get that team up of all the Spider-Man, and DC obviously went, what can we do as a multiverse team up? This is the result. I felt like it did a decent job. It actually, motivated me to see what goes next. I definitely want to see where James Gunn takes this universe. But at the same time, this was a good swing. I'm not saying this is a swing and a miss. This is definitely a swing and a hit. Possibly one of my favorite DC movies, alongside the Suicide Squad, not the David Ayer one from a couple of years ago. But this is a decent shot at a multiverse. I loved Michael Keaton in this. I thought it served very well. Loved Michael Shannon coming back as Zod. A lot of cameos that really resonated well and felt well deserved in this movie.
I agree with all that. Yeah, I think it might also be one of my favorite DC movies. I think the only one
Yes.
I haven't seen is Aquaman. I missed Aquaman. I haven't caught up with it, and I hear that's a good one. But yeah, like you're saying, what would be better than it? The Suicide Squad, and like I think Shazam is a pretty well put together movie. I might
Yes.
enjoy this one more. But yeah, I think everything. It kind of got me like almost a little sad they weren't going to do any more DC like with this DC-ish universe. Like it's supposed to get totally reworked with Gunn coming
Yeah.
in. So I was kind of like it seems like they're almost there. They're almost cooking on something now. But yeah, we'll see. My other last note, kind of about all the multiverse and nostalgia stuff, is it's interesting to see if all these pop culture movies keep having all of these references and cameos from older IPs, older iterations of these characters. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 20 years whenever kids who are growing up now, like, will they still, is any kid going to really identify with this Flash movie
Yeah.
after, because it's like, we're getting so much payoff from it because we know all these characters from all these older movies, but like kids now, like they never saw Andrew Garfield in Amazing Spider-Man. They never saw Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man. Like, are they really going to identify with this the same way that we identified with those other iterations of Spider-Man, or are they just, what's going to happen there? That's something interesting to see. We're not making new stuff as much.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It goes back into they're copying No Way Home. Obviously, most people at this point have seen the Andrew Garfield, the Tobey Maguire, so you feel that in No Way Home. As compared to this, you get the Adam West Batman kind of throwback. You get the George Reeves Superman. How far back are your fans going? And I love the cameos in this. Obviously, my main gripe is the cameos are 100% CGI. I think you very well could have just pulled from those movies, those TV shows, because the cameos in this are kind of just staring off into the distance. I think you could have very well made those older movies and TVs kind of supplement that instead of going full CGI. But ignoring that, CGI is a very common thing in modern movies. It's something we've gotten used to. I think it was a decent movie, much better than I was expecting. I'm not kidding when I said I was going to this expecting a complete train wreck. Like, they had no idea what they were doing, and this was definitely a step up from that. Definitely a step up from most DC movies, I would say. But definitely interested in this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, you've seen a movie this week that you wanted to talk about on this section, and go ahead and tell us what that was.
I have. Yeah, just really quick. I did get to see The Blackening on Wednesday. And that was a very, very fun movie to see with a big crowd. And I think that's my biggest point about this movie is it's not a movie to like watch in your bedroom alone or like really even like watch it like I guess you could watch it with your friends at like a hangout or something, but like you want to see this with the most people possible because like sorry about that. Even more than it being a cinematic experience or the story being great, like it is just fun to watch with the crowd. Like the crowd gets going in this movie. So this is like one you wouldn't expect to be like, oh, you have to go see this in a theater, but you kind of got to go see this one in a theater because I just don't think it'll translate to being home. The comedy in this really works. It is a horror comedy, like a very minor emphasis on the horror, if at all. Very much a comedy
Okay.
movie, but yes, it's a good time. A great hour and a half.
Yeah, I've had this movie on my my watch list since the first trailers posters came out. I thought it'd be an interesting spin, kind of taking on that,
Yeah,
the black guy always dies first in the movies, kind of going on that. So definitely on my list to check out. Gonna have to watch it after your review, obviously.
for
But
sure.
now let's get into the bulk of what we wanted to talk about this week. Mission
Mm-hmm.
Impossible 3. So obviously we're going to get into the review here. We're going to get into some crucial story elements. We're going to get into some big plot points. If you do want to miss those, go ahead and skip ahead to the time screen on the screen now if you don't want to see any spoilers. I feel like this is a great revitalization, I would say, of this franchise. But I don't want to go into too much since I've seen these. So, Reese, why don't you lead us off here? What did you think of Mission Impossible 3?
Okay, like crazy how well it got like back on track from the second movie. Like this
100%.
feels like a sequel to Mission Impossible, and like makes Mission Impossible 2 feel even more like an outlier after watching this because
Yes.
it doesn't go in another direction. It just like basically goes back to Mission Impossible.
Oh my God, yes. I'm not kidding. And I think Reese, you can back me up on this. The opening of this movie before the credits is better than anything that happened in Mission Impossible 2. Philip
Yeah,
Seymour Hoffman coming in as the villain. Oh
so
my
good.
God. That is
He's
an
this
absolute
maniacal,
shot.
menacing presence. Yeah, no, he absolutely rips in this movie.
Oh, 100. It's honestly, so between the last Mission Impossible and this one, there's about 6 years. The first one came in 2000, second came in 2000. This is 2006. It feels like 20 to 30 years difference between these two movies. It is
Mm-hmm.
insane how different these movies are. And I really liked how tactical Ethan was, especially in the opening scene in not opening scene, but the opening action in Germany when he's going to save Kerry Russell's character in this, Lindsay Ferris. That is a genuinely good action scene.
Yeah, I agree. And a big knock on this movie, from what I was reading, is people saying how ugly the action looks. And like, I don't know, it didn't really bother me. And I kind of,
No.
I said before, my brain kind of turns off during action anyway. But I was like, I kind of liked it. But
Yeah,
just
I would understand. J.J. Abrams takes over as directing from this. Obviously, different director every movie up until 5 and 6. But yeah, J.J. Abrams comes in, obviously bringing in a lot of his friends. You get Lindsay Ferris, played by Kerry Russell. You get Greg Grunberg in there as well. A lot of his former assailants from his TV shows and movies. But yeah, right off the rip, this movie is a giant, and I mean giant, step up from Mission Impossible 2. There's really no other way to put it.
I totally agree. J.J. Abrams coming in, and this is the first movie J.J. Abrams ever directed. He obviously directed
Yes.
TV and stuff before that, but this is his first go at making a movie, which is like really interesting because like he was like in line to do War of the Worlds, the one that
Yep.
Steven Spielberg ended up directing, because like Cruise had like the rights to that movie, and then like he was really like in love with Abrams doing that, so it makes sense that like when that fell through, he ended up working with Abrams a few years later. But the thing, like in 2, you never feel the stakes, especially whenever it's supposed to be like this biochemical weapon that's like
Yes.
that's stake. You're like, it just felt like there was no stakes at all. And this movie rectifies that like immediately. Like from the first opening shot, you're like, you feel the stakes. You feel how Ethan is feeling about his girlfriend being, on the line here. And then just throughout the movie, I think it was such a good move to kind of put Ethan's back up against the wall again, like it was in Mission Impossible, where he was the only one who could do what needed to be done. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, it totally clicks. It all gets right back on the track and it goes roaring down.
100%. And I've got to point out some big points here. Like you were saying, Ethan's kind of on the back foot, not even to discredit that, but most of this movie is like a flashback. You get this opening scene that is in, Shanghai, which we get to later, but that later scene is maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And most of this is coming in the background and before that opening scene. And it nails it. I think, first of all, this might be out of the first three, especially the best showing of Ethan Hunt we have seen. I mean, he is, first of all, tactical. We know he is training agents. This is a huge step up. Also, the actual action, I know we touched on it. You said your brain turns off. I feel like in this, it really nails, especially in the opening scene, when you go from the tactical Ethan setting it up. Then you see how that setup plays off with those automated turrets. He goes in, saves Lindsay Ferris. Where do you go from that? You elevate that to a helicopter chase that has, what I might add, one of the most grotesque deaths with Lindsay Ferris dying from that bomb implant in her
Oh
head.
my God.
That is genuinely terrifying of what that could mean for these characters.
Yeah, that's just super unsettling and really an image that sticks with you. And then, of course, later in the movie, whenever the same
Yes,
weapon, the same
happens to
consequences
Ethan.
get popped up again, you're like, it really makes you feel the weight of the severity of the situation that they're in because you know what's about to happen or what could be about to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, sets it up perfectly. I also want to point out, first of all, two people that are in this movie, one that's a returning cast, one that is not. First of all, Lawrence Fishburne is absolutely amazing as
Yeah,
Chief Brassel. I think his writing and his dialogue,
perfect.
especially with I forget his name, but the Musgrave, Billy Crudup. I think his dialogue with him and Ethan is great in this movie. Really emphasizes the kind of working together. They know each other. Their dialogue flows. But then also, and I want to know what you think about this, Benji Dunn. This is his first movie for Simon Pegg in the Mission Impossible franchise. Becomes a huge part in the later movies. What did you think of him in
Okay.
this?
I liked it. Yeah, honestly, I think everybody did a fucking bang up job. I was trying to really kind of think about somebody who might have given a bad performance, and I really couldn't think of anything. But yeah, I loved Simon Pegg in this. Thought he was great. Loved his character. Excited to hear that he's in the next ones. He just is like the perfect embodiment of that guy that you're going
Yes.
to call back at the back of the station. He's overwhelmed and scrummaging through papers and like willing to do the right thing, but like cares about his job. Yeah, I think that was such a well written character and was gives like that little bit of comedic relief while also
Yes.
still being integral to the story.
Oh, 100%. It's a great opposite to Ethan. Ethan Hunt is out in the field constantly doing these dangerous missions. Benji Dunn back in Langley, doing all the behind the scenes stuff that you don't really think about. And I wanted to point out, kind of going off of that, last week we talked about it. The first movie has that great scene where they sneak into Langley to steal the knock list. Mission Impossible 2 tries to replicate that. They do the whole cord drop. He sneaks in to steal the virus. In this, they sneak into the Vatican, and there is a cord drop where they pay homage to that original movie, but it isn't nearly as long or as drawn out as the second movie is. I feel like the homage to the first one in this is way better, and the sneaking into the Vatican and the whole heist kind of, kidnapping that takes place there, I would say rivals that Langley heist from the first movie, builds upon it, and continues to go, especially that bathroom scene. Because, oh my God, is that a tense and good scene? Even having seen this movie, still gives me goosebumps watching that.
I did really enjoy all of those sequences, and as you said, much better than anything MI2 did in regards
Yes.
to homage or straight up copying in that case. Um, but yeah, I think the little homage was great, and I thought that whole break-in heist was awesome. Getting the mask on, and then like having to wait for the voice modulator to upload, and Ethan
Yeah.
just like coughing what he was doing to stall. That was great. Whenever the real Philip Seymour Hoffman's just like right on the other side of the door, that was some really strong stuff. Do I like maybe like if I had to compare the two sequences, like I probably still give the edge to Mission Impossible,
Oh
just
yeah.
because I think that's such a tightly directed scene, but this one is so exciting.
Yeah, 100%. And not to take away from our current discussion, but I am reading the book you recommended about, I think, 2 episodes ago, Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. Currently, I just got through the chapter where he talks about Brian De Palma on Sisters and his directing style, and it just resonates with that directing style of Mission Impossible 1, that absolute paranoia, a great book, a great read, and it really plays out that movie even holds up to some of these more modern movies where obviously Mission Impossible 3 is going to have more action, a little bit more suspense, but still, paying homage to that original and building on it in some aspects. I love in this movie when they're doing that Vatican heist, they're all talking like this is a normal job because this is their job. This is very much what they do on the day-to-day basis. A great line is when Ethan, dressed as Owen Davian, is in the Lamborghini. Ving Rhames opens up the bottom of the sewer system they're going to escape into, and they're just like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Not much. What's up with you?" That's a great, dialogue building section of this is what they do. This is their normal day.
Totally. And whenever they're getting ready to do that heist, and Ethan's kind of attitude, he's like, I don't know, like I'm just gonna make it work. Whenever he's gonna like bungee jump slingshot across 2 buildings, and it's like, like he's like running the numbers, and it's like it doesn't quite line up. But he's like, now I'll figure it out. Like it's like something someone does like in their office job whenever they're like just trying to get something done. They're like, I don't know, I'm just gonna go do it and I'll figure it out. And like he's just doing this insane thing, but just shows you how comfortable he is doing his job.
Yeah, 100%. And I've got to say, from the last movie where they pitched Naya and Ethan as this loving couple, I didn't feel that worked. I feel that Ethan and Michelle Monaghan's character in this, Julia, works, I would say, like 10 times better than that original. This love story really solidifies that they are together. They work well together. Their scenes together are great. And I feel a lot more connection in this than anything that happened in Mission Impossible 2. And I wanted to know what you thought of this, since this does become his wife in the later movies.
Yeah, and there's one moment towards the end of the film where he's showing her how to load the pistol.
Yes.
And then he says something like he's explaining how to do it. And he's like, you do it like this, like how the batteries go into the flashlight in the kitchen or something like that.
Yes.
And that is like just such a perfect line. That's like the Abrams charm there. Like that's what Abrams brings. Yes. And like say what you will about JJ Abrams in some regard, but like that, like those moments just ground everything so much and give you that stakes and give you that emotional connection to these characters. And that's what I think really sets this movie apart and sets Abrams' stuff apart as a whole.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Some other things I wanted to touch on, though, obviously the bridge scene where they recapture Davey and they come in and break him out is a great scene. And that is one of the scenes that I think they start to move towards those practical effects. Now, when Ethan's running from the drone strike that's coming in, launches into the car, that's a practical effect. Obviously, in the later movies, mainly 4, 5, and 6, which we will be covering, we get a lot more of those practical effects, but this is kind of the start of them. And I want to know what you thought of the practical effects, moving away from the CGI stuff that has become very commonplace. And if you could notice these practical effects and really what you thought of these people, really putting in the work to put actual action and scenes into these movies.
Yeah, I thought you could feel that scene in particular. Whenever Ethan gets slain into the car and hits the ground, like it's just like you just feel it in your chest a little bit. Like all that stuff just being practical, it just works. Your body just recognizes it as something that's real, it's happening. Like I think we said this on the last episode, but like how Christopher Nolan said, it's so hard to make you feel danger with CGI. So even whenever they're doing almost the same stunt and they're so much more safety precautions in there, like you still like don't feel the danger as much as whenever it's literally Tom Cruise getting thrown into a car. Like you just you just know, you just feel it different. and it makes for a better movie. It makes for a better experience. You buy it so much harder.
100%. And I don't know if you've seen, they just released a new behind the scenes kind of trailer for the new Mission Impossible with a car chase in Rome. And one of the highlights of that is Tom Cruise going, how do we involve the audience? And I feel that like that is such an important part of these movies, especially bringing the audience into those action scenes and making it feel extremely real. Like, there's actual stakes to these characters. Maybe not in the story so much that you feel, but like watching these, especially 4, 5, and 6, which we're going to get into. And I'm very excited to talk about those movies. But you feel like, holy cow, Tom Cruise is putting his life on the line for this scene. And even seeing it in the theater, if you don't get that, emotion and kind of technicality of these scenes, you can still feel like he's putting it all out there for these movies.
Yeah, it just comes down to like Tom Cruise is a showman. He's putting on a show, he's not just getting the script onto camera and putting it up on a screen. It's like you said, how can we involve the audience? How can we elevate this? How can we raise the stakes? That's like a really common practice in documentary filmmaking, and not that this is the exact same thing, but that's the same kind of thought process. It's like, how can we get the audience to think about this one step harder? Because they know that Tom Cruise is doing all this stuff, so it just gives you that extra level of skin in the game than if you didn't have that prior knowledge.
100%. And then some things more plot-wise I wanted to feel you out on, because I've seen this movie. How did you feel about the twist that Musgrave is actually working with Davian and not Brastel? Because seeing this, obviously, I know the twist is coming, but I want to know firsthand, not seeing this movie, did you see that twist coming? Did you expect that twist coming? Does it make sense? What did you think of it?
I did kind of see that one coming, just because I was like, why else would he be like helping Tom this much? Like, he clearly has an ulterior motive. Like, I don't know if I kind of sniffed it out a little bit. Whenever Tom's in the chair and Philip Seymour Hoffman shoots his girlfriend, I knew that mask reveal was coming. Those are the two that I saw coming, but like, it doesn't make, I don't think it made either of them any less effective necessarily. It wasn't like the element of surprise that really was what they're going for. It was just great storytelling. Even though you kind of knew that mask reveal was going to come at the end, it still like gave you the weight of the danger of that situation, because you knew Philip Seymour Hoffman would shoot anybody in that situation. He would kill any of them if he gets the chance to.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is the best villain in all of these movies. I think he stands far and above the rest. Rest in peace to him. Obviously, it's a tragedy that he was taken so soon. But yeah, he stands out as the best villain in these movies, and you really feel it in this. I love when Tom Cruise picks up the phone that's calling him. Ethan Hunt, he thinks it's going to be his wife calling him, and he's like, "You hung me outside of an airplane." That scene is great when you really feel Seymour Hoffman learning his name as Davian, planning out how he's going to torture this guy for kidnapping him and holding him outside the plane. Really great stuff, in my opinion. I also liked in this, though, and I want to know what you thought about this, how we never find out what the rabbit's foot is. We are led on to what this device is. Owen Davian wants it. We learned that it could be radioactive based on the images of it with the biosymbol. And then Musgrave is like, oh, we're going to sell it to these guys. The United States will find out they have it, and then we'll do what we do best. We'll clean up. What did you think about this world-ending device almost that is never like explained or mentioned to the crew?
It's like so cool. It's so cool they did that. Less is always more. Like, you not knowing what it is, you're going to imagine something so much more terrible and destructive than whatever they could have come up with. Whatever answer like they would have given you. So just like giving little hints to what this thing might be and then letting you fill in the blanks. Perfect. Loved it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also love the fact that, when obviously, again, this is the start of the realistic action. He doesn't 100% jump off the building in Shanghai. It's obviously a set, only a couple stories, but that is somewhat practical, his jump. and then you never get to see him break into the lab and steal that. I feel like that actually adds to the movie. Obviously, we know he gets it, but it's not a huge part that he does get it. It's what happens after, working towards Julia, working towards figuring out how to save his wife. I feel like that's a huge aspect to this movie.
Agreed. And something that I wish a lot of these movies would do more, it's just like cut out that fluff. Like we know he's gonna get this thing. So let's speed through that, and then let's get on to the consequences of what happens after they complete that action that is going to be completed no matter what.
100%. Again, calling Dave in. You got 2 minutes left. Like that is a perfect line for that situation. And as wrapping up this discussion a little bit about Mission Impossible 3, I couldn't help but noticing at the end of this movie, this really does feel like the end of the trilogy. Like 1, 2, and 3, him and Julia walk off together at the end, saying goodbye to all these characters that we've come to know and love. It really does feel, and I mentioned it last week, the fact that Mission Impossible 2 didn't kill the series. This feels like the end of the series, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially with Ethan kind of explaining what he does. Yeah, there's no setup for anything else. It seems like Ethan's kind of walking into like a soft retirement because he obviously kind of, gets asked at the end of the movie, like, hey, don't retire. And he just kind of like, okay, I'm going to go on vacation. But still, it just seems like there was nothing immediately set up. It seemed like it was made to be a stop in the series unless something did get greenlit. But they were like, we want to wrap up the trilogy, leave it at this, leave the door open for more, but we're not. I don't know if they were expecting more or what, but it just seemed like make a good natural ending point here in case something else ever happens past this.
Yeah, 100%. And as we will see in 4, they bring him back in. But yeah, I thought this was a great end to this first trilogy. I'm excited for you to see the next 3. Obviously, it's big. Wrapping up this discussion, though, I think this is definitely a movie people have got to see. This is a great action movie for the more so late 2000s. Really a strong reboot from the previous Mission Impossible 2. And if I had to rate it, I would give this one, it might seem a little high, but I'd get this an 8 out of 10, I think. What about you?
Yeah, it's like 3.5 out of 5 buckets of popcorn, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
100% agree. This is a great action movie. Now turning into our movie trailers, though, I want to talk to you about Till Death Do Us Part. Now, I know you're a big horror guy, and I wanted to know what you thought about this one.
Yeah, this looks very, very interesting to me. It kind of reminded me of like Ready or Not, You're Next.
Yes, I wanted to bring that. Watching this the whole time, I'm like, is this a Ready or Not sequel? What are we looking at here?
That's so funny. And there's a movie that came out last year called The Invitation. It's like this vampire movie. It reminded me of that too. And so yeah, I like all those kind of movies where it's people getting into these engagements and then wanting to get out of them, and there's this force and this group that won't let them. And I don't think the trailer gave away too much all besides that general feel, that general concept. It looked very interesting to me, like visually. So I mean, I'm all on board for this.
Yeah, I would say if it's anything like They're Next, or You're Next, sorry, that is a great horror movie in my opinion. I love that movie. But yeah, definitely a feeling of that as you're watching, she's in a wedding and then she kind of pulls out and you send these groomsmen almost to go and secure her, bring her back. Definitely interesting. Want to see how that plays out. Almost a little, I would say, on the cheesy side. I don't know if I'd say cheesy 100%, but definitely a little bit more of the comedic, fun kind of aspect to it where you can play on that and develop that. Definitely something I'd be interested in seeing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It did. Yeah, I think it had a lot of that energy to it. It didn't seem like it was taking itself really seriously or portraying itself to be entirely serious. It seemed like it was kind of riffing on that. So we'll see if it kind of takes that genre, that little The Invitation, You're Next, Ready or Not, takes that whole energy and kind of parodies it and takes it in a bit of a different direction, or if it's just kind of a riff on the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. I'm interested to see that. Next up, another movie that is kind of, I would say, on the horror aspect maybe, but They cloned Tyrone. Now, an interesting trailer for sure. Jamie Foxx, John Boyega, interesting nonetheless, but really plays on that kind of suspense thriller kind of aspect, I would say. You know, kind of finding the lab, big Get Out vibes from this one. I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I really like this kind of trailer where you're watching it and like you're seeing like this seems like a really well directed movie. This seems like it was put together
Yes.
really well, and you're watching it and you're like, I really don't know what I'm watching, what this is about, what entirely is going on here, what the hell even is this thing? But like, I think I like it, and it's like that's like just the perfect trailer to me. It creates intrigue, but like I couldn't say that I have a really great grasp on that movie after watching the trailer.
100%. It starts off almost like a comedy, I would say, you know, showing Jamie Foxx is the pimp kind of character. You know, I forgot who the second actress was, but she kind of plays, Tiona Paris plays the more of a foil to the pimp almost. And then John Boyega plays like the side kind of character, but a lot of comedy in this. And we've been covering, you know, comedy trailers these last 3 episodes almost where comedy's kind of died. Coming back in this, it would seem almost as a kind of comedic horror movie that I'm definitely interested to see 100%. I think it's coming out only on Netflix. Would love to see us in the theaters if possible, but definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. I would say out of all these trailers we watched for this episode, this was probably the one that intrigued me the most.
Yes, I would agree. But then going into the next trailer, and I've seen this a lot. It is playing in every
Yeah.
theater right now. When I go to see it, I just saw The Flash, as stated. This was on there. Gran Turismo. Now, this is based off a video game, and I've never been a fan of the video game movie trailers or movies in general. But this kind of seems a little bit different. You know, we've got some big people in this. Orlando Bloom. I'm blanking on his name right now, as always. But the guy from Stranger Things, Hopper, he's in this. Kind of playing on that a little bit. You know, I love Ford v Ferrari. I'd love to see another great racing movie, but I'm not really quite sure what to take on this one yet.
Yeah, I've seen the trailer a lot too, and the trailer really gives away like the entire movie, like pretty well front to back, which is kind of really irked to me because it looks really well directed.
Yeah.
I'm like I would go watch this. It seems like it'd be a ton of fun, but it's like they really are like hitting a lot of the beats there, and like the concept is pretty straightforward. I just wish they wouldn't have given quite as much away and like maybe focused more just on like the idea like, oh, this kid might make it to the real
Yeah.
league, and not like showing the whole progression. But I mean, it's like based on a true story, so whatever. But
Yes. Very
as a
much.
movie, I'm excited to see this. I think
Definitely feeling like this could be a good step away from those video game movies of the past where they're pretty stale, pretty bland. Big actors in this as well. So I'm hoping, you know, this might do better. Summer movie, big blockbuster coming out. Definitely hope this does surprise me at the theater. We'll be seeing this one for sure.
yeah, I'm excited for it.
And then going into the next thing, listen, this one has been a big talking point that I covered a couple weeks ago, but definitely going to have to talk about it now because it is still going on. Hopefully, Reese, you can lend some more insight into this as you are in the main spot that's happening. But the writers' strike, you know, we have a big strike going on with a lot of the writers thinking that they deserve more money, which I agree with. I definitely am on the side of the writers in this one. Movies are becoming more and more of investments. They're definitely more money driven. And the fact that these writers are not getting the money they deserve is really a big problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely on the side of the writers, of course. And the strikes here in LA are, it's been going, I forget how many weeks it's been going on for, but there are still so many people picketing at every entrance to every studio. Like if you drive by Warner Brothers out here, every gate has people picketing in front of it. Same with Universal, Netflix, everything across the board.
Yeah.
Something I just read the other day was an Apple executive anonymously like gave this interview and was saying that the writers' strike is less about the specific the actual deal for the writers. Like they're like, we could do the writers' deal and we would be pretty much fine with that if that's all it was. But it seems like these corporations are almost more afraid that if they give in to this deal with the writers, then it's going to be give such a precedent for other unions to like also ask for more in their next negotiations and strike. And like, so it almost seems like these studios want to kind of just like snuff out this strike so that other unions don't also strike, but they're not so worried about this deal specifically. It's just like the writers are unfortunately getting made example of. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. This is one interview, but that's a really interesting perspective on it that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is an interesting precedent to set, when you settle a strike. Obviously, I've never been involved in one of these or had to deal with them, but definitely interesting to think about, like, if you set a precedent for the Writers Guild, what are you going to have to do for everybody else in the movie making business? But a lot of big news coming out of this writer's strike. I don't know if you've heard, but Marvel has canceled 2 of their shows recently and pushed back on a lot of their upcoming releases as a result. Big problem for them right now is Jonathan Majors. Now, if you've heard, Jonathan Majors is facing some allegations in the media. Obviously, maybe not the best person possible. But if you want to rewrite him or recast him, and especially for any other movies, it's going to be tough to do without any of your writers. And, where do you go from here?
Yeah, there's nowhere that you really can go with a lot of scripted stuff. Like I think, they were trying to shoot Deadpool, but then like Ryan Reynolds wasn't allowed to improvise it all because they can't change any lines. They would have to leave it locked with the last version of the script that they got from whenever the writers were still in. And now, it's going to be reality stuff, and sports is kind of the only thing that we're going to be able to pump out. And that's what I think a lot of these studios are kind of leaning on and hoping to move towards. There's a lot of controversy whenever HBO Max switched to just Max, and then there was no more like directed by, written by credits on the Max like shows and movies. It was just like creators : so like Stanley Kubrick with like the 7th person listed like on The Shining. And so like that was like a big ordeal because it seemed like they were trying to like just do that to kind of blur the lines between fiction and nonfiction stuff more. So it's kind of a really messy time to be a writer specifically, but any sort of creative in Hollywood.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely think they need to reach an end to this. Writers are such an important point in these movies. I think definitely the writing is probably the most important part of a movie. Your directors are basing themselves off these scripts that are written, and it's really just a bad look if we don't reach a conclusion and agreement to these writers that definitely deserve their pay. Also in the news, I'm not sure if this was entirely based on the writers, but avatars have been pushed back. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this, but based on the last Avatar that came out last year, Academy nominated, Avatar 3 has now been pushed back to 2025. Avatar 4 is 2029, and Avatar 5, which is supposed to be the wrap-up of the franchise and series, is now 2031. And I wanted to know, based on the first movie and the second movie, what are your thoughts on this? I'm kind of withdrawn. I like the first Avatar. Second one I felt was a almost carbon copy of that original. I don't know if I'm going to be interested in this movie's, 8 years from now in 2031.
If I've ever learned one thing, is that you never count out James Cameron. It seems like everybody always counts him out, then all he does is come back and release like the next biggest grossing film of all time. So I'm like always going to be there for James Cameron no matter what he does. I like Avatar in the theaters. Like, again, Avatar's just like not something you can watch at home. You got to be there like in Dolby 3D, the whole 9 yards to get the whole thing. Like, is it a movie? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know if it's a theme park ride. It's like something in between. It's just an experience. But because when was Avatar 2 originally supposed to come out? I mean, these things are never going to come out on time. It does seem insane though to be like scheduling a movie 9 years down the road or whatever, 8 years down the road. 2031 is just crazy to even think like that. That doesn't sound like a real year.
Yeah, especially, talking about counting James Cameron out. I wouldn't count him out, but like, how long are you going to be locked into this franchise? Because, James Cameron's getting up there in years. A lot of directors are now. And if you're going to be locked into the Avatars till 2031, I mean, that's got to almost be the end of your career, I would think.
Yeah, I would think that's what he wants to do. I think he just really wants to just nestle his feet into this and just put everything he's got into this franchise and go out with it.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely I'll be there to see him. I'm hoping, I didn't hate 2. I didn't really understand the Oscar nomination for that, but I'll be there for 3, 4, and 5, 100%, especially with this big gap between all of them. There'll definitely be some time to think on the last ones, revitalize the series almost. Also, though, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning 2, also thinking about a pushback. We're covering those movies now as a result of the writer's strike, considering being pushed back. I'm thinking that these won't be too big of a discrepancy, though, as they're being Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2 are being filmed back to back. So those scripts, I would assume, are kind of locked in. I wouldn't assume there's too much change in those, but it is an interesting time we're in right now with this writer's strike, pushbacks of these movies, kind of a bizarre era.
Totally, especially like right after we like go through the whole COVID thing where we had so much stuff pushed back.
Yes.
For that, obviously, then we kind of went through a big wave where everything was coming out all at once. And we're finally hitting like a decent groove again. And then now it's like we're going to have another big series of pushbacks. So,
yeah. And then wrapping up our episode for today, we do want to talk about the Argyle cast. Now, I've been following this movie a little bit as it's been announced. I don't know about you. Matthew Vaughn is directing. I've been a huge fan of the Kingsman movies. I've loved those movies. And with this movie coming out with somewhat of a star-studded cast, I wanted to know your thoughts on
it. Dua Lipa, wild. But yeah, Bryan Cranston being in it, great. Bryce Dallas Howard, I'm excited. Henry Cavill, obviously. Yeah, I think this will be. That's a very interesting cast. I don't know that I would ever like think about all those people being together in a movie in my head, but I'm excited to see what it ends up looking like. And like a really big cast for a movie that's. Hold on, what the hell is that? Sorry. A really big cast for a movie that's being distributed by Apple.
Yeah, especially, Apple, a lot of the streaming sites right now trying to come out with these big produced movies on their sites. This is definitely one of them. I mean, you've got a bunch of cast, like you mentioned, Henry Cavill, Bryce Dallas Howard, Bryan Cranston, Dua Lipa, Samuel L. Jackson in this, John Cena in this, Sam Rockwell, one of my favorite actors in this. Definitely going to be interesting. I think Matthew Vaughn could definitely do something interesting with this movie, and I'm excited to see where they go with it.
I am too. Yeah, just with a cast like that, it's fascinating, regardless of what the movie ends up being like.
Yeah, 100%. With that, though, we are going to be wrapping up for today. Thank you guys for watching. Always, please leave a comment down below if you want to add to this discussion. I'm always watching those. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to stay up to date with my content, consider subscribing. Once again, a huge thank you to Reese Wigman for joining me on this episode.
Thank you.
Oh, I love you being here, man. And as always, we will see you guys next week for episode 9. And once again, you guys have a great day.
Peace.